I'm a bit late with this, but with the reruns of Firefly, Blade, and Jingliu now out on some servers and soon some other servers, I'm sure you were wondering whether you should actually still use your Jades on them. And in this video, I'll be helping you with that exactly, describing their shift in the current meta alongside reasons why you should or should not pull. Starting it off with the break character Firefly. Firefly did dominate the scene for a while, especially on her release, but the times have not been kind to her. While still having a strong kit that does provide her speed, doing really good break damage, having access to great teammates that do a lot for her, it's not really her that is the problem, it's mainly the fact that break as a archetype has become the problem. Break in general hasn't really been that great, especially with the additions of really fast bosses so they can constantly refresh their toughness bar. You do have Rerun made to help you with extensions, but that always is not going to be enough anymore. Just look at how many buffs Hule gets. He gets so many, so it's kind of cope to think you can actually just have him perma break. There isn't too many of this, but we are going in the direction where a lot of bosses actually end up getting weakness locked. And weakness lock means you can't actually break them, and the whole thing with break archetype is you need to break them in order to do damage. When they are not braked, every break character is going to do negative damage. The only exception is there's some funny setups you can do with Bootail, but even he will definitely do a lot less damage than you normally would because that is how the archetype works. You want to break the enemy to get the damage. Firefly's kit is still nice though. It does implant fire weakness, so you are able to deal proper toughness damage. She excels in blast, so she also did have problems with AoE setups because in AoE she does fall off, as you have to constantly be switching, constantly refreshing the break, and having enemies go down lower, lower, and lower. And at E0, S0, you did have the problem of skill points that was only solved by E1. Alongside her skill point issue at E0, S0, you always have to run a super fast sustain in order to generate skill points for the team. And the way to get Firefly to do really good damage nowadays is to really just do a sustainless setup, which break characters do often have the best type of sustainless setups because of how they do work. But unfortunately, even with that, it can become an issue, just because Firefly will be consuming skill points a lot, especially with how fast she does become within her complete combustion state, where she gets a bunch of speed to act a lot more. Due to that, you will have the issue of running into skill points. So with the meta shifting into AoE for a while, she already saw a big drop off there, with enemies now gaining a bunch of speed to refresh their toughness bar relatively quickly, even with the help of Ruan Mei's weakness extension break. In general, unless you have a really high invested in Firefly team, it is relatively hard to actually use her to keep up in the current meta. Not to say she can't clear, she still definitely can, but just on the side of what she is right now, she unfortunately is not able to clear too well. Despite having a pretty strong kit with just a few flaws that can be fixed with some minor vertical investment, she still has the issues of the content going back to AoE at any moment. We are shifting back to a little more single target area, but we are getting bosses introducing weakness lock where she can't do anything until that mechanic is gone. And also enemies that once again are super fast that will refresh their toughness bar. So the only way to really kill is to do a full sustainless setup where you do have enough vertical investment to where you can kill very quickly. This requires level of something like E1 Firefly, E2 especially to get the extra turn, as that is going to be really good. But even with those, she still can struggle a bit, albeit a lot less so with vertical investment, just like any other DPS, but it still can be a bit of an issue. That brings us to the next topic, should you actually end up pulling for Firefly. If you can only afford E0, S0, and you're interested in that, I highly do recommend against it. This also depends if you do have teammates that work really good with her. Do you have the MC available for being Harmony Trailblazer? Because Remembrance MC is a lot more popular right now. If not them, do you at least have someone like Fugue E1 even, because Fugue E1 weakness break efficiency is super good. Ruan Mei practically everyone does have at this point, but if you actually have her free, do you have early investment in Ruan Mei such as E1, as defense ignore is super good with break characters and one of the only other amp sources they have. Do you actually have these teammates on your account? Do you have them free? Do you have the right investment? And if you just have a bunch of E0, S0 ones, Firefly is definitely going to struggle, as unfortunately as it is. The break archetype is just not strong right now. Unfortunately, until it does see more buffs, it won't be able to perform as it once used to. If you are someone considering getting something like E1 or even E2, then it's a lot more plausible because you probably already have a team ready for her if you're considering something like E2. With vertical investment, Firefly becomes a lot stronger. The E1 gives access to more defense ignore, while the enhanced skill now no longer consumes skill points, letting you freely spam it, which is very good, and no longer needs you to run a SP generator. E2 gives you access to gaining an extra turn when you do defeat an enemy or break their weakness, so that can help you get even more output, which is why her E2 is still very strong to this day, and allows her to be a lot more usable. If you are able to consider those early investments, or you have a team with highly invested characters, let's say you're already a Bootail user, or you're already a Rappa user and you have stuff like Fugue E1, Harmony Showbase is still available, maybe you even have Rerun May available, and you are able to get something like at least E1 Firefly, then it actually becomes a pretty good option, especially if you do like her. But unless you're able to vertically invest in the team / Firefly herself, I definitely advise going against E0S0 as it just does not perform as well anymore. Next on the list, we do have one of the 4 characters that did get buffed, that being Blade. Blade actually got very nice changes to his kit, finally moving him to a full HP drain DPS and not having a attack scaling split. Now also having one of the highest taunt values, if not the highest taunt value in the game for his skill for a turn, so allow you to get hit even more. And the best part is Blade does benefit from one of the strongest sustains in the game right now, especially their light cone mainly. Without their light cone, it isn't as much of a difference, but with their light cone, that being Hyacine, Blade becomes a lot stronger, especially because now Hyacine, who is built really fast and acts a lot, is able to give up Blade charges with the HP drain of her light cone. A E1 Blade is very strong in the meta right now and can actually compete with an E0 Mide, which is insane to think about a 1.2 DPS, able to compete with a 3.1 DPS, that's how strong his E1 and his base kit did become. And especially access with the general supports that do work with HP scalers a lot better than we did previously. Like before Blade got buffed and before 3.x, you really just had a generic team with running Sparkle or someone like Bronya for a -1 setup, Ruan Mei, those were kind of your only options. But nowadays we have Sunday, we have Tribi, we have Hyacine, we have a lot more options for these HP drainers. And Blade definitely does get a big benefit from them. The best team you can run with Blade right now is running Sunday, Tribi, Hyacine, which is a very common setup and is very good for him. Sunday with a -1 setup is going to give him great buffs to crit damage, also allowing him to act more with the -1 setup to get more drain procs on his charge. Tribi, especially with E1, is one of the biggest amps he can get. And Hyacine, again, not only doing damage on her part, that also does apply to Tribi. Tribi also does do damage as well. The HP drain from her light cone is very good, and her sustain is also very good. The changes Blade got with the buffs were very beneficial. His E1 was very much buffed as well, now being able to let his enhanced basic attack and ultimate deal additional increased damage to an enemy, with the increased amount being 150% of the tally of Blade's HP loss from the ultimate. So his damage output is a lot better. And with the full changes to his actual kit being fully HP scaled, his damage output just received a overall buff from all sources. But that does bring the question if you should still pull for him. The reason I do not recommend pulling for Blade despite him being strong, especially even if you do have these characters, is because you now have the opportunity to lose your 50-50 to him. I will never ever recommend a character that is in standard pull for you to use a whole pity on, just because at any moment for a future character you do summon on, you may end up losing to Blade, and now you effectively did waste a pity. Yes, he does have a strong E1, but he's still a standard pull. Yes, you also do have to battle the fact that you have up to around 7 characters in the standard pull that you would lose to, and there is a chance that you never do get him. That is true, but there still, again, is always a possibility to multiply losing your 50-50s to him. Especially if you're a lower spender / free-to-play player, where Jades are a lot more harder to come by, it's going to be a lot more difficult for you to manage if you do use your pity on Blade. Again, he would still be a strong pickup, especially if you do have access to his teammates. If you have Sunday, Tribi, Hyacine, Light Cone, it's very strong. If you're missing Sunday and you use someone like Bronya or Sparkle, he's still very strong. If you sub out someone like Tribi, you can still do well. Hyacine, Light Cone is a pretty big drop off, unfortunately, but still is very workable. If you're missing 2 of them, then his output does definitely drop off by a lot, or if they're occupied and you don't want to use them with him, then yeah, his output does drop off by a lot. But even with that, I do not recommend him solely for the fact that because you can now lose your 50-50 to him. He is strong, he can compete with Mide, especially if you do have his E1, but unfortunately I never would recommend someone to pull for a character that does have the ability to be lost 50-50 to, just because it is simply not worth it. Last up, we have another character that was buffed by the 4 characters that did get buffed, this time being Jingliu. Jingliu was also fully changed to being a HP scaler, so no longer scaling off purely attack, which did change her builds. She had a ton of changes in her kit. The whole HP scaling changed her multipliers. She gained access to a bunch of crit damage in her base kit. All her dupes were changed to do anything from attack to now being crit damage, gaining better traces such as being able to ignore more defense of the enemy. A lot of stuff did happen for Jingliu that made her a actually very competitive DPS to days now. If you compare to what she was before, obviously she was infinitely worse, but now she actually is a lot better. And you can definitely very much clear with her. With the exact teammates that is going to be best for Blade, it is the same for her. You want to have a -1 setup with Sunday. Tribi E1 is going to be great, and also Hyacine Light Cone to have more HP loss, which can help you gain more stacks from her talent. The only problem is with the whole HP draining of your team archetype to get stronger, she is competing with one of the best DPSs in the game right now, being Castress. Castress does use the same teammates as Jingliu on her best team, just minus Sunday. So if you are on a scarce teammate limit, and you already have someone like Castress, that does diminish Jingliu's value by a lot. As I mentioned, Jingliu is now strong. She can very much clear in modes. Ideally, you are taking her against blast-based bosses because that is where she does perform best, as her enhanced skill is blast. Unfortunately, she does just end up losing to Castress, even in single target and such, because Castress does have the bounce in blast, because Castress just does cover everything. Again, she covers AoE, she covers blast, she covers single target. With the whole dragon playstyle, she does end up just doing more damage than Jingliu. So in the archetype, Jingliu does lose to Castress. But if you're someone that doesn't have Castress at all, then Jingliu can become a pretty strong pickup for you, because again, she does end up being pretty strong with these buffs. She can very much clear MLC, especially right now. She can do APOC pretty well as well. The buffs that Jingliu did get definitely did make her become a DPS that can clear with a lot less investment than you needed previously. But that does beg the question if you should summon. If you have Castress and you already have a team built around Castress, then I don't recommend Jingliu at all. You still can make a second team for Jingliu, but not having Tribi and not having someone like Hyacinth, especially with a light cone, because usually those would be glued to Castress as well, is going to be a pretty big drop off. You still can put someone like Rerun Mei or a defense shredder with Jingliu. Jingliu also uses Sunday, so she does have that advantage as well. It still overall just wouldn't be worth it, as you do want to perform at almost the best capability you can do, and missing 2 out of the 3 best teammates is going to be a bit rough. Not saying it's unworkable, but overall, if you do have Castress, it pretty much just is the same job, but better. I wouldn't really recommend picking her up if you do already own Castress. But if you're someone that doesn't own Castress, then Jingliu can actually become a good pickup, especially if you already have the characters or you're willing to get them. So if you have Sunday available, if you have Tribi available, if you have Hyacinth and her light cone, you can very much pair them all onto a team and you'll have a endgame DPS that does very well. Again, the buffs made her strong enough to clear, but she only does end up just losing to Castress with the whole HP drain niche. But if you are missing multiple teammates of hers, like let's say you don't have Hyacinth or her light cone, you don't have Tribi, maybe you have an Easer, Esther, or Sunday, it does become a lot more rough because their damage is going to fall off by a lot. Their damage is very solid and very consistent, especially with all the self buffs she does have with crit damage and such. But unfortunately, you still want to get the better rare buffs. If you don't have someone like Cypher or Silverwolf, you can sub out instead, just to have the higher defense shred and such, and vulnerability and whatever. Then you will lose out on a lot of damage, and it may still be a bit tough to clear, because she is a strong DPS with her buffs that can clear, but you still want to have a good amount of investment because she still is a older DPS. It's not like Silverwolf where her role got completely amplified and now she's one of the best debuffers. It's not like Kafka, who just became a full support for her dot niche. Jingliu is still a DPS that is competing with very, very strong DPSs, especially with someone like Castress doing the same thing pretty much. So you definitely want to make sure you do have the right teammates available, and if you're missing too many of them, then she isn't really too flexible, especially as a HP scaler. HP scalers, unfortunately, are tied to characters like Tribi especially. Some are tied to RMC. Sunday does work with mainly 3 of them, just not Castress. She's the only one where he doesn't really work. Hyacinth Light Cone is tied to Blade, Castress, and Jingliu, so 3 of them, that just isn't Mide. Mide is the only one that doesn't really use it. So that is a problem with being an HP scaler. You are fighting to have these teams, but Castress with the team will perform overall better. So if you don't have the teammates and or you do just own Castress and they're glued to her, then I wouldn't recommend her, but if you do have the teammates or you're willing to get them close to the future, you can pick up Jingliu in that case. And that does wrap up the video, going over the 3 characters and their slots in the meta and whether if I recommend them or not. Again, Firefly, unfortunately, she just does need the right vertical investment to make her really good in this day. Just because the break archetype just has not been received much love. Just because the break archetype has been left to rot. So unfortunately, the only way to counteract that is with the right vertical investment. Blade, as good as he is now, unfortunately, just the losing 50-50 is going to be super important, as you could potentially waste a pity on him, maybe even 2 if you get unlucky, and then in the future you randomly lose to him and you effectively wasted the pity. Granted, he has a really broken E1, which is the one that makes him compete at higher levels, but it is still just something you shouldn't do. And then Jingliu, she's the one where if you just have Castress, you shouldn't really bother because it's the same thing on the same team, minus Sunday, and if you don't have Castress, then you can very much consider. If you did find this video helpful, dropping a like would be greatly appreciated. If you're new to the channel or haven't done so already, be sure to subscribe and turn the bell icon for more videos like this, along with all other types of Star Wars content, and I'll see you later. Peace out.